Thank you for downloading this podcast from Digital Mindfulness. This is episode number 37. Hello and welcome to Digital Mindfulness. I'm Lawrence Ampofo. We have a special episode this week as I talk with three amazing speakers. This week we have a panel of people that includes Joe Burton, CEO of the corporate mindfulness company Will.com, the co-founder of Mindful magazine Jim Gimian, and producer of the upcoming Mindful Business Conference Erick Randolph. As part of this episode, we have a special giveaway for Digital Mindfulness listeners. We're giving away a free pass to the Mindful Business Conference on the 9th and 10th of May in New York, as well as amazing gift baskets for the runners-up. All you have to do to win is tell us in what ways do you bring mindfulness to your workplace. Tweet us the answer at @digitalmindful or email us at hello@digitalmindfulness.net. The winners will be announced on the show next week, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. So, everybody, welcome to the Digital Mindfulness Show. This is the first of a brand new structure that we've got on the show, having a panel discussion. So I'm absolutely delighted to have you all here with us today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, great to be here.
So now what I'd like to do is just introduce you all to the audience, and for people that might not know who you are, I'm wondering if you can almost go around the room, if you like, and just if we can start with you, Joe. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about Will, and if you can just tell us a little bit about how you came to Will and your interest in mindfulness and business and technology.
I'd be happy to. So I'm Joe Burton. I'm the founder and CEO of Will. It's WHIL. We offer digital mindfulness training primarily for corporations to help their employees. I personally got into a practice about a little over 3 years ago, really through my own stress and anxiety working in public companies. I was a global COO of a large organization. Spent a lot of my time traveling around the world, stressing people out and stressing myself out, and really got into mindfulness as a last resort to help deal with things like chronic back pain, insomnia, and some other issues that I was experiencing. And now we're working with 26 companies. We've got lots of users around the world, really helping them focus on things like relationship, work, and performance through mindfulness practices.
Brilliant, thanks. And how about you, Jim?
My name is Jim Gimian. I'm publisher of Mindful magazine and mindful.org. We're a mission-driven nonprofit launched about 5 years ago, but really we've been covering the emergence of applied mindfulness in all aspects of society and life for 15 years or so through other publications. We're started off with the kind of gathering the energy among those advocates who've been working in the field for some time, the champions. And I'd say at this stage, it's really all about expanding to the broader audience that's coming in large numbers to find ways that mindfulness practice and in many different forms can help with every aspect of work life and home life, from relationships to stress reduction to creativity to the kinds of things we'll talk about in business. Our audience on the print publication is just under 100,000. The website, a little over 500,000, and those numbers are growing rapidly now as we're reaching the broader audience. So we want to just help shine a light on the work people are doing, make it easy for people in new areas and new communities to learn about mindfulness in a language and culture that's comfortable and accessible to them, and help people find ways to integrate these practices into their everyday routine, which is already, quite complex and busy, as we'll discuss.
And yourself, Erick?
Yeah, no, I'm Erick Randolph. I am the conference producer for the Mindful Business Conference. I work with the Eventful Group, and we're a research company that we develop professional learning communities that we deliver on via conferences. And we've been doing that for about 20 years around the globe with over 30 events. And those largely live within process industries and asset-heavy industries. But through our content development, we've been learning from our attendees that they wanted to spend more time talking about people, they wanted to spend more time talking about culture, performance, and leadership. And we saw this as an opportunity to meet that need of our communities through bringing mindfulness as a component. We brought Joe in as a speaker to one of our conferences, and he did extraordinarily well. It was very well received. And we then decided that we wanted to develop a particular brand that was focused on the conversation around mindfulness in the business world and what those contexts look like, industry agnostic, so spanning across multiple verticals, and looking into what success stories were already out there and finding the people who had figured out how to do this well and the people who were still working on it to help grow that conversation and really get back to our core theme of building that professional learning community, this time around mindfulness.
I guess now what I'd really like to do is just start off with this question, and that a lot of people that I speak to, I guess a lot of lay people, they're kind of afraid of mindfulness, and there's a whole kind of culture behind mindfulness, and a lot of people really are afraid of the fact that it's going to take a lot of their time to get into a practice. So I'm wondering if you can just share, why is mindfulness, especially for professionals, such an important practice to cultivate?
Hi, it's Joe. I can take that one. I had the exact same fears. As someone who spent his entire career working inside of public companies, I was very concerned that mindfulness and getting into a meditation practice was sort of hippy-dippy or would somehow cause me to lose my edge. And what I found is the exact opposite. What brought me in was really the science of mindfulness and sort of the data behind all of the clinical trials and research and studies correlating mindfulness with a wide array of health and performance benefits. And when I initially got into a practice, I'd say it probably took me about 2 to 3 months where things really started to click, and I started to see improvements in my relationships and my sleep, particularly in the issues I was having with back pain. But I had to get through that, oh no, it's going to be hippy-dippy aspect. And what I found is you can find different flavors of mindfulness and different types of trainers. And, our focus is purely on the secular side of things, but you can also find trainers who are interested in the spiritual side of things. But actually trying it and the science is what got me over that initial hurdle to find out it's not a big concern for professionals.
Yeah, I'd add, this is Jim, I'd add to that excellent overview that as the field is developing, those presenting mindfulness applications for busy professionals are finding very creative ways to integrate it into what folks are already doing. I mean, the great fear is who has time to add yet another discipline or practice or something you have to make a considerable time commitment to. But we see almost every week new ways that these practices are woven in to meetings, for example, where people are hassled about going to meetings, they're hassled about leaving their phones unattended during the meetings. By the time the meeting's halfway over, they're already starting to think about the next one. And consequently, you have 5 people or 7 people around a circle, none of whom have actually been present and attended to the work at hand. So it's not really very productive. So now, many places are instituting a moment of quiet reflection at the beginning of a meeting, giving people the opportunity to gather themselves, bring their full attention and creativity to the point at hand. And so therefore that meeting is a much more effective and productive, and you don't have as many sort of bits and pieces left over after you've spent the time, and you can then move on to the next item of business. So in the end, short applications wind up being time savers through greater effectiveness, bringing your attention to the matter at hand.
How about yourself, Erick? What do you think?
Well, I think that the two experts have spoken, but I'll echo much of what was said, but also chime in that during our production process for this conference, we went out and we interviewed about 150 people, different corporations all across the country, and in some cases around the world. And much of what we heard was that mindfulness has garnered enough attention that it's moved from being very fringe and kind of dangerous to now just sort of odd, and it's on its way to becoming mainstream. And so the conversation is less about really kind of telling people that mindfulness exists, but rather demonstrating the research that is growing by leaps and bounds every year of the positive impacts that mindfulness can have and the various elements of your life in general, but also specifically in your business life, the way that it can, and I always couch it in can impact. It's very important not to draw any direct, absolutely causal links, but that it can impact your attention, it can impact your conversations, your interactions, your interpersonal skills, it can impact your performance or your reaction to feedback, your ability to lead. And all of these things are skills that are highly identified as critical within the business world to be successful.
Would you all say as well that the need for mindfulness or mindfulness practice amongst professionals, would you say that it's a symptom of our time? Would you say, for example, that it's a symptom of too much digital in our lives or too much distraction?
I actually would think it's the other way around. In fact, I think that the additional demand on our cognitive processes due to increased digital input is calling to our attention something that would have been helpful or is helpful in any circumstances. There's no reason that people wouldn't have gleaned many of the same benefits from mindfulness practice applied to daily life 30 years ago, far before the demand of the digital life was upon us as it is now.
So I was just going to ask, would you say then that we're as busy and we're as distracted now as we kind of always have been?
No, I think we're much more busy and distracted. I'm just pointing out that the benefits of mindfulness practice aren't just because we are now overwhelmed with digital input. They are particularly helpful now, but they're actually helpful under any circumstances. Even if you have some listeners here who don't happen to be consumed with the question of being overwhelmed, maybe they work in an older framework or setting, I would still argue that the same benefits of innovation, creativity, being able to discern things more carefully that come at you would accrue to them as to those overwhelmed with digital input.
Yeah, I can come at it from a large company perspective and a lot of the customers we're working with. I think the interest in mindfulness for professionals now is absolutely driven by the pace of modern living. Right, big companies are seeing increases in everything from absenteeism and illness and injury, stress, anxiety, depression, pharmaceutical usage, and it really does accrue to the pace of modern life. Right, I think the research suggests we all get hit with between 5,000 and 20,000 messages a day, and it's increasing every year. The pace of global connectivity and expectations from companies on their employees are increasing every year. And the interest in mindfulness is, I think, if you're going to pick one word in the professional setting, it's probably burnout. People are being burned out by the pace, and they need tools to help them cope. And I think that's where mindfulness comes in.
So I guess, Erick, with the research that you've done, I mean, you've actually, you've had boots on the ground and actually speaking to people. Is this something that people are reporting back to you that they're feeling overwhelmed and suffering burnout and would like to develop a practice?
Absolutely, they're reporting burnout. They're reporting overwhelm, and I think it stops just short of that. How can I develop a mindfulness practice? And it's more along the lines of, can you tell me more about how mindfulness would address that? As the literature becomes more suffuse, we start to see more and more articles out there. Barely a week goes by that the Harvard Business Review doesn't publish something about mindfulness. But people are seriously intrigued, and they don't see it as a kind of mysticism anymore. Perhaps that's the wrong word to use, but they see it as something that they want to learn more about the direct practical applications of how it can address these top feelings of burnout and overwhelm.
One of the things that I love just kind of looking through all of your work with mindfulness is that it's very much an impact. The approach, mindfulness itself, it's very empowering, isn't it? It's very much developing within people the ability, their muscle, their kind of attention and focus muscle, if you like, to spot any kind of damaging patterns or stressful situations and to mitigate those. I'm wondering though what you think, if you think technology has a role in helping people to become more mindful and develop a mindful practice, or if you think technology is actually part of the problem.
I'll let you guys answer first because I feel very strongly about this.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for you, Joe. I'll just say a little bit then, maybe, and let you, round it out. I don't think technology is the problem. I mean, I think technology is just a fact of our modern life. It's in some ways a heightened version of the saber-toothed tiger waiting outside the cave 100,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, however many years that was. So in other words, the you could always blame the seeming cause of a problem. But we're seeing tremendous ways, I think Joe can speak to this, that technology is aiding us in the addressing of an ongoing problem with stress that human beings have had through settings throughout history. I think that it would be a mistake to either demonize the technology on one side of the equation without giving it its due in bringing creative solutions to addressing the challenges, bringing mindfulness in so many different forms and formats to people's mobile devices. So I think it's kind of a fundamental human condition that's increased, perhaps, but certainly not caused by the current use of technology.
Yeah, I'll let Joe really finish answer because I think he's got the best perspective on it. But I do just really want to reiterate what Jim said there. Technology is certainly not going away, and people are, if anything, looking for more ways to leverage their technology to get them into mindfulness and mindfulness practices.
Yeah, I think there's an old saying in mindfulness of meet people where they are, right? And meaning whatever it is they're dealing with, whatever knowledge level they have, meet them there and then bring them along. But another sense is where they are is in front of their mobile phones. I mean, that's where we find people, right? And it's how we're living our lives, and we need to develop solutions where people can incorporate mindfulness into their day-to-day, whether they're traveling, commuting, need a break at lunchtime, need help sleeping, etc. The phone is right there. About 83% of the usage for our products is through a mobile device, right? It's just how people live their lives. And, we're also a big fan of live training inside of companies where you can bring in trainers to create community, get people to interact that don't interact together. But what we know from our research is live training is expensive and it's impossible to scale, right? So meeting people where they are these days is how can we get it to you on your computer, on your mobile devices, anytime you need it, recognizing that everyone's different and, whether they're going through stress or anxiety or something wonderful like, unlocking imagination or creativity or intimacy, needing help with a relationship, people need to be able to find practices in the moment to fit into their life. And I think that's where technology comes in.
You've all three spoken about how mindfulness is actually coming now. It's actually on the radar of big corporations. Is actually kind of being seen as a strategic imperative for companies. But I'm wondering, for people that don't know, what does a smart, mindful company look like?
I think a smart, mindful company today, and we talk to customers all the time, here's what it looks like. One, it recognizes it has a problem. And by that I mean more and more companies are suffering through disruption. That's one of the keys of the Mindful Business Conference, and the impact that disruption has on culture, right? So meaning everything is about faster, cheaper. We don't really treat each other particularly well in a lot of corporate settings. The very notion of co-opetition means we cooperate until we can beat other people. And all of these things come into the culture of the workplace. And I think so really slowing down and recognizing issues like that, issues like we've got 4 generations of people working together in the workforce for the first time, right? And they don't particularly like each other that much. They've got different languages, different ways, different expectations, different ways of working, et cetera. And so just slowing down and recognizing what we're dealing with right now and all of the forms of disruption and what that does to a company and to its culture, and saying, okay, we've got to address this. And then, step 2 is how do we start to bring these practices in small bite-sized chunks to really start to transform how people work together. So to Jim's point earlier, kicking off meetings with a 1-minute meditation to get people settled, focused, drop whatever they ran into the room with, and really be present for a meeting is a very small but impactful way to do that. And then from there, we like to grow in terms of how do you incorporate, ideas like individual motivation or teamwork or collaboration through mindfulness practice, whether you bring people together for 5 or 10 minutes at a time, to bring these practices not just within themselves, but also into how they work with other people. Right? And that's how you start to transform and really create a mindful culture. So we spend a lot of time talking with companies about those small bite-sized chunks and how they can build up. And at the end of the day, the culture is about the individuals, right? And so building a mindful workplace is about how the individuals relate to themselves and how they relate to other people. And, a lot of companies we talk to are looking for the pill form of mindfulness, and it doesn't exist. It actually takes practice, and it starts with the individual.
How about yourself, Jim? What do you think? I don't know, what kind of companies or groups of people have you been most impressed with, particularly with the way that they've integrated mindfulness into their operations?
I think that more than a specific description of what activities would be observed in a company, because those are always changing. I think Joe articulated some excellent starting points, but I think we will see that this will evolve in terms of what specific activities might reflect a mindful orientation. But I think at the core of it, it's an insight or an openness on behalf of the companies that the whole being of the workforce, the welfare of the whole being of the worker, is a critical element to the success of the company. So therefore, the physical health not only manifest in less loss of time in the workplace, less productivity, higher health care costs, but on the positive side, a robust health and passion for work manifests in excellence at every level of the workforce. And if you look at every aspect of a person's life and include that in the way in which the workforce is served, as an element for the company, then you start seeing creative ways in which a mindful company addresses its unique challenges. And we see lots of different, examples. At Patagonia, if a person wants to take a break during the day to get on their surfboard, and that leads to some creative break in a problem they're wrestling with, well, that's fine. And things like that happen in even places like General Mills, who's been one of the early leaders on the big corporate side of integrating mindfulness training for leaders, where they can take a break, they can go into the designated mindfulness room and have a quiet moment, or they're encouraged in their time between meetings to have some mindful walking exercises that provide a gap between very demanding meetings. So there are dozens and dozens of ways that this manifests, but I think the fundamental orientation is the understanding that people who work in the company aren't just production units, but they are living, changing human beings with a lot of different things going on, and those things included in the consideration of the daily activity winds up to be a company who can measure high on productivity and low on healthcare costs. These are the kinds of things that companies are striving for.
I mean,
I think one of the things that excites me about the Mindful Business Conference is having this conversation put on for professionals, by professionals, and the wide array of conversations that are going on, right? So there is a bit of health, but there's also performance, there's leadership, there's cost reduction, there's disruption, there's culture. And these are the things that, the C-level executives are dealing with when it comes to a workforce, and really we live in challenging times to do business, and we live in challenging times to be, a human being that's not totally stressed out.
Yeah, Lawrence, I think that Joe's hit upon something that is actually a good symptom of the evolution of interest in the corporate sector in mindfulness. And that is, up to this point, the conferences that you would see on the landscape are excellent conferences, but where the presenters are primarily coming from that early adopter, advocate champions in the field who are promoting the use on behalf of perhaps their company who can come in and provide consulting to teach mindfulness in the corporate sector. But now we're making a huge shift. If you were to look at the speaker roster for the Mindful Business Conference, you'll see that 85% of them are going to be names that nobody who's been to a previous mindfulness conference will even recognize, because they're not from the inner core of early adopters. They're from companies that have been doing this work quietly for some years, and the presenters are executives in those companies sharing their learning. And so you have a very different dynamic. You have a symptom of growth in the field where people in the corporate sector themselves are now qualified to present the work that their company's been doing. And therefore you have the people coming from traditional conservative mainstream businesses who want to find out about this, but no longer have to go to, the revival tent and hear the early adopters singing, the chorus lines. They can go to their colleagues who've been doing this work in the trenches in very mainstream companies and hear the reporting. And I'm very excited that the field as a whole has evolved to that point. That's a great, great sign.
I mean, just to put your futurist hats on for a little bit, but everything we've been talking about now, the kind of popularization of mindfulness and the kind of widespread acceptance of mindfulness as a strategic business choice is amazing. And the natural progression of that for me is that this is incredible culture change within the workforce. And if you're kind of changing cultures alongside this disruption that Joe you were speaking about, you were saying how it's having an effect on people. This makes for wildly successful companies as opposed to organizations that do just treat their employees as numbers or as just as production units. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think we also have to be open to however business gets there. In other words, I think a lot of companies do have the best interest of employees in mind as a starting point, and I think a lot of other companies have crisis as a starting point. In other words, a lot of companies and a lot of advertising agencies at the global level are seeing historic turnover rates of 25% now move towards 40%, where people just aren't happy, in that space with a faster, cheaper mentality of getting creative product out the door. We're seeing companies where their injury rates are increasing, and the average cost of an injury is $38,000 a year, or $38,000 per employee that's injured in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So, massive expenditures. And so a lot of companies are coming saying, we have a crisis with absenteeism, we have a crisis with injury rates, we have a crisis with illness and healthcare costs. And so they're coming at it from that perspective. And if we can invite them into the conversation and say, great, these practices will definitely help with your crisis, but it all starts with the individual, right? And bring them back to the focus on the individual employees and how that focus is going to change their culture and deal with their crisis, then I think we have a great conversation.
Fantastic.
I think that one thing I'd like to add there is just to be very clear. Even though, for instance, I'll speak for our organization, our name is Mindful. It's not so much that we're interested in foisting this new practice or set of practices upon people. We're far more interested in what we believe the results will be. The results of a workplace where people can individually flourish, be productive, be passionate about their work, feel they're not overwhelmed by the technology, and therefore the result can be a successful company and therefore a more successful society. Those are really the goals. And so we've reached this point where everybody and his brother's promoting mindfulness. I think one key to the success of this will be for those of us who've been the early champions to get over it and to look at the ways in which the benefits can come into these companies and into individual lives through whatever means, and to have our activities focused out. So therefore, seeing, for example, mindfulness as one part of a larger health revolution, if you're looking at it in terms of health, rather than mindfulness as another thing among a long list of things that people have to learn and integrate into their life. It can be woven in to activities, as Joe said, that progressive companies are bringing in from many different resources to improve their company and the life of their staff. And I think the sooner we weave what we're presenting in along with many other solutions, the more the future beneficial impacts will be possible, and that future that you talk about will be attainable.
Okay, so again, this is a question for all three of you, but I'm wondering then, just a nuts and bolts question. If I'm a busy professional, I'm at work, I'm working 60 hours a week, I'm in digital all the time. How do I integrate, not start, but how do I integrate a mindfulness practice into my life so that it enhances my career and also the quality of my life?
Great. I think the answer is if you're brand new to mindfulness, start slow. Right. Start with 1 minute practice. Do that once a day, and then start to build from there. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. find community near you, whether that's in your office where people are getting together, or in your neighborhood where you can join, a mindfulness group. And first and foremost, go to will.com.
But Joe, would you say though? I mean, for like the people who are super busy and they've got children or are juggling a million things at once, is it, if they've only got time to even meditate on the train with an app or, like you say, with Will or whatever, is it preferable to do that than nothing at all, or would you say it's better to do the work and find the people and sit down and have your 10 or 20-minute meditation?
I think really it's about the individual starting what's right for them. And one of the things we humans suffer from is this: we're all too busy to do anything, and that's actually one of the first symptoms that you could probably benefit from mindfulness. So the idea of taking 5 or 10 minutes out of your time on Facebook or Twitter, or reading the same angry news every day, and getting into a practice where you actually train yourself to sustain your attention, right? To not be stressed out by the future, by the past, and just be able to enjoy each moment. For me, I think what most people will find, and what I found, is you free up a tremendous amount of time in your day by being able to focus on what matters and not worry about things that don't matter. And that trade-off is not one-to-one. It's not giving up 10 minutes so you can find 10 minutes. I think it's giving up 10 minutes so you can find 3 or 4 hours every day. And I mean, that's the power of mindfulness in my own experience.
Yes, I think Joe's outlined it very well. Start simple with what is most meaningful and close at hand. No big join the gym memberships for, commitments 7 days a week to be in the gym, which will certainly fail. And seek support from someone you trust. Nowadays it's pretty easy to find someone that's got some experience and can help make the entrance much easier. So
I think that what Jim and Joe have said are probably the best ways that you could get started in this. For myself, I actually I just picked up a book, honestly, and it was a mindfulness in 8 weeks book. And it was kind of a self-guided 8-week program that I took myself through, and that was sort of getting my feet wet. And so after that, and being part of this, fantastic group of people, meeting dozens and dozens of engaged people to kind of motivate me, but not necessarily having any kind of one particular accountability partner or anything like that. But it was helpful for me to go through kind of a self-paced thing first, and to read at my own, what was comfortable for me, and to get started that way.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, we've come to the end, and that's an awful shame. But again, Joe, we'll start with you and then we'll go around. But Joe, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Thanks for having us again, Lawrence. People can find out about Will at will.com, that's WHIL.com. And that covers everything we're doing with individuals and the large companies that we're working with.
Brilliant. How about yourself, Jim? Where can people find out more about you?
Mindful.org, our website, which is dedicated to informing, inspiring, connecting people who have an interest, and you will find something there that will be helpful at whatever stage you're at.
Brilliant. And yourself, Erick, with the Mindful Business Conference, can you just tell us a little bit more about that and where we can find out more about it?
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having us on. I really appreciate the chance to chat. But you can check out the conference at mindfulbusinessconference.com. There you can find, we have the full list of speakers. We have, well over 25 speakers who are going to be talking about their individual stories, several keynotes, some quite notable. We've got Dan Harris, Tim Ryan, we have Jonathan Rose, and of course we have Joe and Jim highly involved in the conference as well. You can also check out, we've got our blog on the website where we update pretty frequently with either speaker stories or some kind of mindfulness information. But yeah, it's at mindfulbusinessconference.com, and the conference is taking place on May 9th and 10th of this year. It'll be in New York City.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I really appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom with us all.